History is the recording of past events, specifically the ones that relate to human civilization and past societal ways, which include examples like political movements and new ideas. History is important to me because it shapes the way I view our society, and it also acts as a comparison to the past events, which helps me form my own opinion on today's life. Throughout this course, however, it has reshaped my understanding of history because it exposes the misinformation and misguided stories that were told throughout history. This class has reshaped my understanding of history by challenging my belief that the jazz era was beloved by all Americans, revealing evidence toward redlining and how impactful it was on generational wealth for black families, along with challenging my belief that America joined World War I immediately rather than maintaining a neutral stance, and finally, challenging my belief that the New Deal was the sole reason we were able to escape the Great Depression. The first time I was really open to accurate history was through our covering of the jazz era. Although we covered this era in my high school classes, we would graze over specific political opinions on this jazz revolution. Because of this, I was unaware of the belief held by many Americans that jazz was the root of all evil, and it influenced the younger generation to lose the American conservative traditions. A quote from our book stated, "Jazz originally was the accompaniment of the voodoo dancer, stimulating the half-crazed barbarian to the vilest deeds." This close-minded and arrogant belief about jazz was something that I was unaware of. Without this information presented in this class, I would have been historically misguided. Before learning about this ignorant belief towards jazz, I would have been misinformed. This is even more prevalent when we covered redlining. Redlining is a discriminatory practice where financial institutions, especially banks and insurance companies, deny services like mortgages, loans, and insurances to individuals. These denials to individuals were often racially motivated. The government would rate cities and towns based on safety, which would impact the housing market. They would strategically give black neighborhoods a poor rating so that white people would move out and move in to the suburbs. This created a mass disadvantage in generational wealth for black families. In our book it states, "The good life of material abundance in the suburbs was not available to everyone. However, minorities, especially blacks, were largely excluded from the government-guaranteed financing extended to millions of the white Americans." Throughout my education, I was unaware that the government implemented these rules that created a disadvantage towards black people. I was ultimately misinformed before learning about the redlining in this class. To continue my argument of the misinformed history I obtained in my education, the neutral standpoint from President Wilson before joining the war was not something that I was ever aware of or that was ever emphasized to me in my history classes. It was something that was surfaced over and not mentioned. In my education, they pushed the idea that America stepped into the war and saved the day, which they did immediately. It wasn't as simple as this. For a long period of World War I, America did not want to join the war. Instead, they stayed neutral. From our book, it stated, "The nation genuinely welcomed President Wilson's proclamation of neutrality. Every man who really loves America will act and speak in the true spirits of neutrality, which is the spirit of impartiality and fairness and friendliness to all concerned." This was said by President Wilson on the 18th of August in 1914. These small details that were not presented to me in my earlier education is what changed my perspective on American history. My perspective changed with these specific historical events that I was not aware of before this class. It shows me that in our education system, U.S. history is often taught in a very fast pace, which creates many events to be, brushed over. Lastly, I want to discuss the post-Great Depression. Through my prior education, I was informed that the New Deal was the great solver to the recession. I developed this belief throughout the teachings of U.S. history that this New Deal improved unemployment, which was the reason the U.S. was able to recover from the Great Depression. Unfortunately, it wasn't that simple. The drop of the unemployment rate from 1933 and 1937 makes it seem like the New Deal saved the recession, but in reality, President Roosevelt began to worry about the national debt caused by the New Deal spending tactics. In the book, when discussing the improvement on unemployment, it stated, quotes, Roosevelt, however, worried the national debt, swollen largely by the New Deal spending on relief programs, had grown too large. This nation that Roosevelt and his New Deal saved the Great Depression isn't entirely true. The teachings of U.S. history led me to believe that the Great Depression was easily and simply solved by the New Deal. Again, this was another piece of history that was brushed over, which led to the absent details of Roosevelt's failures that came with the New Deal. These examples expose the reality of U.S. history. It is taught through one specific lens that tends to leave out specific details, leading the audience to become historically misinformed. This class left out 0 details, which revealed to me this new perspective on U.S. history, that it is taught through one singular lens.